There seems to be some confusion when it comes to installing more than one amplifier in a vehicle. Should you use one power wire or multiple wires? Did you ground everything one spot, multiple spots? How much does it matter? Does it matter at all? How do you split the low-level RCA signal? How many items can you connect to the head unit's remote turn-on lead? This wire right here. Let me share some thoughts on this topic on installing multiple amplifiers, because it's not that bad. First off, we're going to talk about power wire, which is this stuff right over here. I have some 4 gauge, I have some 10 gauge laid out. We're going to go into that in a little bit more detail momentarily, but for right now, let's talk about this power wire. Now, this is where most people go wrong. With more amplifiers, you're going to need larger wire. If you've already installed a power cable in your vehicle for an existing amplifier, you may choose to simply install another wire for additional amps. But personally, I prefer to run one new wire that is large enough for the entire system and any other planned upgrades in the future. It's always better to have a power wire that is larger than you need than a power wire that is too small. The price difference between the 2 wire gauges, say for instance 4 gauge versus 2 gauge, is negligible compared to the cost of having to run a second wire which is larger in diameter in the future. Some reasons are: it's usually cheaper than 2 wires in terms of material and labor costs. It's also easier to run one wire as opposed to 2 individual wires, and less messy. You'll also need to make fewer connections at the batteries. Since there's only one wire, you only have to connect one ring terminal at the battery post and only one fuse holder under the dash to feed the whole audio system. When using one large wire for multiple amps, you'll need a way to split the power wire into smaller wires for each component, which you can see I have some distribution blocks laid out over here. I prefer to use a regular distribution block, which is something like this. It's one in and multiple outputs, which you can use something like this. This here is a T-style for larger gauge cables, and also another good choice is a capacitor, which you can apply the money that you would use for distribution blocks to a capacitor, which you can mount close to your amplifiers, specifically closer to the one that draws the most current, such as a sub-amp, and use this as a distribution block. So that's another option right there. I prefer to use that if I have an option, or if you're making it look nice, you know, just for aesthetics. The capacitors are a nice choice, and they're also less expensive, and there's no need for all these extra fuses if you use a fuse distribution block, such as something like this, which accomplishes a similar type of job as this, where you have one in and 2 outputs, so it's like a T three-way. This one here as well gives you 1 in here, 2 on the sides, which gives you a T three-way, but you have individually fused outputs, and you can only run up to an 8 gauge leg on the output side. And again, you'd have to independently fuse it with separate fuses such as these AGUs, which is okay if you really need to be very focused and detailed with the amperage that's running on each independent circuit, given that your particular components don't have integral fusing or adequate fuses on them. This might be a good option, but it's not my favorite. It's a little dated in my opinion, but it does serve the job for some particular applications, so don't, you know, leave it out as an option for you. So with that said, that's really it on the distribution blocks. I'm going to go into these just a little bit more closer towards the end of the video, and I also wanted to stress that these distribution blocks may or may not work very well for your ground distribution. In a lot of applications, for noise situations, you might get more noise doing a common grounding point. Some other systems are better when you have separate isolated ground points that are several inches, like I have about a half a foot away from one another. But again, it all depends on the applications. Read your manuals, what your manufacturer specifies. See forums, other people who've used similar equipment, because there is no one right answer for every job. Now, a couple words on grounding. Like I mentioned, some vehicles require a good common grounding point. Some vehicles benefit when you have separate isolated grounding points. Sometimes you have that with a combination of a common ground from front to rear. I mean, I've seen it all. I mean, there is no right answer, like I mentioned. The right thing that you can do, and anybody can ever do, is use a tool such as this, which is a multimeter. Set it to impedance. The lower the impedance on your ground between your component and the chassis of the vehicle, the better. The less impedance is basically going to decrease the multiplication of the noise. So that horrible cat in your trunk noise when you hit the gas, it's like, if that's what you're trying to avoid, that's a good tool, and it saves you money down the road trying to buy, you know, quick fixes and band-aids like ground loop isolators and other little black boxes to make the problem go away, which could be solved rather easily just by doing some better proper wiring up front. So moving along, I want to talk about some RCA cables, which are these, what you see here. This here is a 15-foot standard patch RCA composite audio cable. I also have some Y splitters, which come in two varieties. You have one female, two males, one male, two females right there. I'll explain to you what's up with those guys right now. So now that you have your power and your ground wires connected, you'll need to give your amps the best music signal from the head unit up front to the rear where your amplifiers are located. The best way to be is if your head unit has separate preamp outputs for front, rear, and sub. So 3 sets of preamp outputs. One dedicated for your front and rear for your 4-channel interior speakers, and another pair for your subwoofer amplifier. That would be the optimal scenario. So if your head unit is lacking these options, then there's some other stuff that you can do. You can use these Y splitters, which is the least preferable method because they will dissipate the signal to some level and degrade it, but how much is going to depend on the signal voltage, what kind of brands you're using, how well they play together. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Again, refer to your manuals. If your amplifiers will be powering dissimilar speakers like subs, mids, tweeters, etc., then you can use an electronic crossover to split and filter the signal going to each amplifier. Sub-bass frequencies would be sent to the subwoofer amp, and high-pass signals would be sent to the other amplifiers. A crossover will have built-in line drivers which will increase the signal voltage of the RCA cables, and this can help lower the noise of the system as well. I don't know if you knew that, but it does work, and I'm a huge fan of line drivers, signal processors, but in today's world where everything is so digital, most of these radios already have all the stuff built into them. But consider it if you're doing an esoteric system and you really have some real wild stuff going on, a lot of plans, a lot of components, a lot of amplification going on, you might want to invest into a signal processor. So some amps will have RCA pass-through circuits, which basically mean you'll have audio, will have 2 lines of audio in, and you'll have another pair of blanks, which are females, to run and daisy chain out to another amplifier. It does happen. There's a lot of amps out there that have it. If you want, you could of course utilize that feature. If not, some of the other things that I talked about, you might work out better for you as well. So the least desirable method is the Y splitters. The best is the signal processor. So with that said, you have your RCAs basically covered. Whenever you do run these, by the way, because I am going to go into the actual wiring part of it without getting too technical. In any car, it's recommended by the book that these cables, power and audio cables, should be a minimum of 18 inches away, and whenever they cross, they should cross at 180 degrees like so. Reason why is because if you have audio signals and you have power, you might have heard of the term EMF, which is electromagnetic frequencies. These things will throw off some nasty noise, and these audio cables can always be very susceptible to picking it up, which is the audio signal going into your amplifier. So it's feeding the noise into the amplifier. The amplifier is in turn amplifying that noise, and outcoming your speakers is this horrific noise. So whenever you run your audio cables, packaged cables, do them on one side of your car, have your power cables on the other side. And it's okay to have your remote turn on lead with your power, say on your driver's side if that's how your car is. It's easy. Some cars it's the opposite, where you have audio on the right and power on the left. Some cars it's the complete opposite. It doesn't really matter, but always do this. And when they do meet with one another, do as I said, always do a cross like this. But of course, if at all possible, avoid it at all costs, because all you're doing is asking for trouble. So your remote turn on lead, I've already created separate videos about this. This here is the blue wire, which your stereo is going to send a signal once it's turned on. It's going to turn on your amplifiers. Is it okay to have this and split it off with a simple butt connector or some heat shrink and some solder and split it off to multiple amps? In most cases, yes. If you're using a signal processor, that'll automatically beef up the signal with an internal relay, which is another benefit of using those processors. But I also have many videos on relay wiring, how to turn a low 12-volt signal into a stronger 12-volt signal. I've done several videos now that I think about it. And I also have a free PDF, which is an 80-page book. It's a free PDF, and I actually have given it away to thousands of my viewers over the years. And you are welcome to have a copy as well. So if you want one, just shoot me an email. The email is in the end of the video, or it's sometimes in the description. Just ask for it. You'll get it. I'll send it to you. There's no charge. I want you to be educated, and I want to share, and I want you to learn, hopefully, something from this video. So use that as a tool if you're interested. It's a good tool to use. Now let me just go over some of these components that we have over here, because there's a lot of stuff and I wanted to just really quickly touch on them. When you're doing a distribution block such as something like this, basically all it does is you take a large gauge going in, and it has all these little outputs right on the other side, so you can take one and you can create several output channels just like that. You just screw them down, machine thread, you put this little protective cover on it, and it works wonderfully. Same thing applies to this three-way. It's just a larger diameter distribution block, essentially, is really all it is. These can also be utilized for remote turn-on leads, other triggers, wires, if you have accessories like lighting or any other motorization, amp racks, or whatever stuff you come up with in your system. They work wonderfully. As far as the protection underneath your hood, some choices are for a small powered system, ATC fuse holders, which are like this. They work great up to about, say, 200 watts. They'd be good. This here is another option. This here is a maxi fuse holder, which is really just a super jumbo ATC fuse holder. You can cut this and you'd have a ring terminal going to your battery, and then the other half you would butt connect and have that running to your amps. Some other choices are a top post connector if yours is not going to do the job because it doesn't have enough outputs, or if you just want to increase your gauge and take your factory, put it into here, and have a heavy gauge for your amplifiers dedicated and have some auxiliary posts. This will do the job nicely. It's a nice budget way of doing it. Something like this, which we sell exclusively, which is the same thing. It's a pressure fit, squeezes down, and it has a digital voltmeter on here, which is great because if you're having systems with problems like they don't perform and when the car's idling, you would never know the problem if you don't have a digital voltmeter. This here actually tells you by tenths if this system has a problem. It does it internally. It's just wonderful. I mean, they're small, they're compact, they look really cool. They're great for car shows. They're just great to have. I personally love them. Another option is something like this, which is a circuit breaker, which has no actual fuse to burn out and melt. This will actually just arc and pop the breaker if anything shorts. It's a dead short, or if it's just draws more current than this particular breaker is rated to. The downside to breakers, in most breakers, the higher quality breakers that run 40-50 bucks are actually pretty accurate, within a few percent. These import breakers like this can vary up to about 12%, which I've measured myself in the past. So be careful, be wary of those. Here's another top post connector, just a different style. And over here we have the old classic, which is the AGU fuse holder, which has the slide off sides, which give you a flexible option for running either an 8 gauge, or you can take the screw out, that sleeve will fall out, and you can run up to a 4 gauge onto this AGU fuse holder. And this is, in most amp kits. And these fuses go up to they actually go up, believe it or not, to 300 amps, and that's dangerous because a fuse holder like this, in my opinion, should never take anything more than 100. So, not a big fan of those because they're misused. If they're used properly, they can be an installer's best friend, but if used improperly, watch out. Now this one here is an A&L fuse holder. A lot of people have seen and used these things. They're very cool. Again, make sure you have a good quality A&L fuse holders because they make these fuses up to 300 amps, which in my opinion is not a fuse any longer. That's a dead short. So use with care, but I've always used these. These are my own personal preference in my own systems just because I don't have anything that runs anything near that kind of wattage. But these are really great. I love A&L fuse holders. They're my favorite. Replacing the fuses, they're very easy to find, and they work wonderfully. Very easy to see if they are or aren't blown, unlike some kind of fuses like this. You can't hardly even see them. It can be a little stressful. For GMs, pieces like this, battery side post lug extenders are great because if you find it difficult to find a way to get your lug on to your battery for, say, a GM, certain vehicles, a GM side post extender will fix that job. Or if you're adding a second dual battery mode, isolators, what have you, these work really cool. That's called a side post extender. And of course we have this guy here, which is a standard. This is a 3.2 farad digital capacitor. So this here kind of acts very much like this guy right here, which has a digital voltmeter. And once you cut your system on, this is going to automatically recharge to full capacity. And once you turn your system off, and also while it's running, this here will show you the display. And after you turn the car off, it'll also stay on for usually about 5 minutes or so, and then it'll auto shut off by itself. But they're really cool because up on here, you can see they have these little lugs, and you can get a lot of stuff on there. So say if you have 2 amps, which my video is basically geared up towards, you can have your one audio running input here, you got 2 more rings, and you could have one going to your 4-channel amp, another one to your sub. Mount this up in there, you get a nice little effect from having the light. You put this in there, it looks wonderful, and it helps supply a little extra battery as a surge when needed for your amplifier that draws the most current. Like I mentioned, most likely, of course, your subwoofer amp. So I think that's it. All these components that you see right here in front of you, we sell on our site. So if you have a question, or if you're not sure if I covered something that you missed, shoot me a comment and I'll be happy to help you out more. Be sure to check all the links down below if you're looking for that free PDF that I'm offering. If you just have anything else, that's it.